Okay. All right. Good evening, everyone. Today is Tuesday, July 6, 2021. Time is now 6 o'clock, and this is a regularly scheduled meeting of the City of Georgetown's Planning and Zoning Commission. At this time, you ready? You can sit there. We'll ask Commissioner Haney to lead us in the pledge before you sit down.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, and liberty and justice for all.
Okay. I believe, Sophia, you want to go ahead and go?
Good evening to all commissioners and those in attendance physically, as well as those in attendance virtually. This message is particularly for those that are in attendance virtually. We will have public comment on those items that have been identified to have a public hearing. If you can, please in the chat, identify which item you're here to speak on. That will help us. But we apologize in advance for any technical difficulties that may exist. This is our first hybrid meeting of having both participants virtually and in person, but we will work through it. And if you need any support during this meeting, please send a chat message and staff will be here to support you. Thank you.
Thanks, Sophia. All right, so based on the commissioners we have present, we do have a quorum. So at this time, I'll remind everyone that the complete agenda for tonight's meeting and all the supporting documents have been posted to the city's website. If you have questions on locating any of this information, please reach out to a member of the planning department staff. So tonight's meeting will have three parts. We'll have a regular agenda, consent agenda, and a legislative agenda. The regular agenda concludes item A. Consent agenda includes items B through item AX, and the legislative agenda includes items AY through BD. So the first item we have tonight is public wishing to address the board, and I don't believe we have anyone signed up to speak. Is that correct? No. So that'll take us to the consent agenda. So let's see. Commissioners, are there any items that anyone needs to abstain on?
Limited to the consent agenda?
Limited to the consent agenda. Yep. Okay, so if not, are there any items on the consent agenda that the public would like pulled? Okay, not hearing any. I'm a recusal on the consent agenda, so I'm going to step away, and Kayla, you can call a vote on that.
As to the consent agenda, items B through AX, the floor is open for a motion.
I motion that we accept as presented.
Motion by Commissioner Warren. Is there a second?
I second. This is Sheree Heinzman.
Second by Commissioner Heinzman. Can we have a vote, please? All in favor, raise your right hand. It appears to be 5, or is it 6?
Cherie's raising her right hand too.
Raise my right hand.
I don't
She's
know
right
where to
there.
look.
I'm somewhere in the chambers.
The vote is 6-0 with Commissioner Perthes abstaining. Thank you. And we can return now to the legislative agenda and Commissioner Perthes, Chair Perthes.
Let's see. I'm back. Okay, so our first legislative agenda item is item BC, and Mr. Ethan Harwell will be presenting this item.
Maybe AY, Alpha Yankee.
Oh, sorry, AY.
And Chairman, I have to recuse on this one.
All right. Good evening, Commissioners. Forgive me, I have to get used to presenting in person again. The first legislative item tonight is a request to amend the Summit at Rivery PUD. You'll know the Rivery PUD as being that development around the Sheraton Hotel with the brownstones to the north and the Rivery Park apartment complex to the south. Behind the development is the Rivery Park Rivery Park Regional Park with connections to our trail along the St. Gabriel River. Along I-35, you'll have,
Hey, can we clear the,
oh, it's not on my screen.
Just a minute, we think it's the.
I guess I had it unmuted, right? Unmuted or mute?
Is it possible for the commissioners to follow along in the packets that are in?
yeah, we can do that. I mean, as long as everybody's fine having that on the screen.
You shouldn't miss much.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
All right. If that's all right with y'all, we'll keep going.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, we'll start back. Our first agenda item tonight is a request to amend the Summit at Rivery PUD, basically to allow a drive-through restaurant within the development. We'll get more into the specifics of that as we go on. Like we were saying, the Summit at Rivery PUD is that area directly around the Sheraton Hotel along Rivery Boulevard. The development is bordered by Rivery Park and the San Gabriel River Trail to the east and to the north. Between the development and I-35, you have a few fast food restaurants and the discount tire store. On the south side of Rivery Boulevard, you have the Walmart and Home Depot and the strip centers around those. And then, of course, movie theater and new townhome development going in behind the movie theater itself. Within the development, it's broken down into a few different sections. So there in the center, you have the Sheraton Hotel. To the south of the Sheraton Hotel, you have the Rivery Park apartment complex. In front of the hotel, you have some retail development and the new Summit Lofts that are under construction. And then to the north, you have the brownstones with the central green there in the center and the parking lot between the brownstones and, excuse me, Rivery Boulevard. The entire the entire Summit at Rivery development is within the same PUD that has a base zoning of C3. It's currently within a regional center. The Summit Rivery PUD really fits in this regional center well because the regional center is intended for large-scale commercial users as well as higher density multifamily users. So destination attractions like the Sheraton Hotel and Conference Center, as well as the higher density apartment complexes and lofts and different styles of single-family homes like the brownstones are exactly what our comprehensive plan calls for within the regional center. The Summit at Rivery PUD was established around 2012 and is really one of the truly mixed-use developments we have here in Georgetown. We'll get in, excuse me, in just a moment, we'll get into how it regulates development within the PUD. But the intention behind the development is to provide a destination like the Sheraton, with a hotel and conference center, while also mixing uses, retail and multifamily that complement each other. So if you read the PUD document, you'll find that they have specific standards for what types of uses can go where in the development and how they relate to each other, mostly by prescribing, how the street should look in terms of landscaping and street design with sidewalks and pavement for vehicles, as well as how it addresses parking, sharing parking between different areas of the PUD. Concept plan in the PUD looks a lot like this. Behind the window blocking the screen, you would see some blue buildings outlining mixed-use office and condominiums, as well as an extended stay hotel. That is what is called Zone A, which has been developed as the Rivery Park Apartments. Within Zone B, you have on the concept plan, you have a hotel and conference center with the mixed-use retail and shopping organized around central plazas. That will be Zone B, which today is the town center with 2020 Scratch Kitchen, as well as the lofts that are under construction. And then what you can see on the screen in yellow, those are the brownstones, what was called Zone C. So within the PUD, there are also some exhibits that prescribe exactly how the development should be constructed. The black line weights there outline public streets and vehicular and pedestrian paths through the development. Hidden in the top right, we have a green space and amenity plan for how those public spaces are not only functional and used by the public, but they also are amenitized and developed as such. Then on the bottom left-hand side, you see an example of a pocket park within the development, as well as a cross-section of what the ideal street within the development should look like. So like I mentioned, the development is divided into 3 zones. Zone A, there at the south, reserved for multifamily uses. Zone B, reserved for the hotel conference center, as well as retail uses and some mixed uses. Interestingly enough, the PUD includes some terms for the mixed-use development. So with the lofts that are being constructed, you'll see that the first floor is being reserved. It will be used as multifamily for the time being, but it's constructed so that it could be converted to retail if ever that is needed in the future. And then Zone C, you see that the brownstones are being reserved for themselves as a single-family development. Within each of these zones, the uses you see listed on the left are the permitted uses. However, the PUD does allow that the uses listed on the right could be permitted in each of the zones, whether they're Zone A, B, or C. So those uses on the right could be permitted. Essentially, the change that's being requested tonight is to add the language on your screen in blue, which is partially construed on the screen above me, and to remove the language in red. So under Zone C, which you can see, it outlines the purpose statement. We will be changing the purpose statement of Zone C to permit one restaurant with a drive-through. And then under all zones where we have listed restaurant, bar, tavern, or pub, general office, medical facilities, general retail, personal services, which are things like hair salons, dance studios, things we're going to have a service done, and parking garages. Under all zones, we'd be modifying restaurant to remove a parenthetical that reads no drive-through, to change the word restaurant to restaurant general, which is a term defined in our UDC. I'll show you that here in a moment. And to change that parenthetical to read may include drive-through facilities meeting vehicular stacking requirements of UDC Chapter 9. So we're going from brownstone solo to brownstone with a restaurant with a drive-through to simply the word restaurant, no drive-through. We're changing that to restaurant general, may include a drive-through if meeting all the requirements. You can kind of see it there. I wanted to share with y'all the reason we're changing the word from just restaurant to restaurant general. That we're changing that because the definition you see on your screen for restaurant general is a term defined by our UDC and includes specific prohibitions on fast food restaurants. So if coming here, a restaurant with a drive-through would have to demonstrate to us that they're not your traditional fast food restaurant. This contradicts with the definition you see at the bottom of the screen, which is the second option our zoning code gives you for drive-through restaurants. That is where you are intended to, how you're intended to classify more of your traditional drive-through restaurant. One concern that came up during review of this request was concerns about parking and stacking. With these with these drive-through type restaurants, the applicant does not intend to have much seating. Be primarily drive-through. So the parking requirement from our code outlined on the screen, one space per 100 square feet of dining area plus 4, would really likely come down to that 4, seeing as they might likely not have any dining area inside. The vehicle stacking would have to comply with our UDC, which would say you need 6 places for cars to stand in line from the street to the order box, and you would need 4 places from that order box to the window where they actually pick up their food, meaning 10 cars could sit in line on the property without blocking traffic. Realistically, since most of the development is built out and developed, the place where this new restaurant would likely go is at the northeast corner of Heinz and Rivery. Currently, the site is used for as a temporary parking lot. You'll see the large oak tree and signs in front of it. Roughly, the site is 140 by 140. In general, we found that this complied with all of our traditional rezoning criteria. Of course, the applicant gave us all the information we needed to review the request. We found that the addition of a, excuse me, auto-oriented use is consistent with our description of the regional center, but that it was being done here in such a way that it did not detract from the pedestrian nature of the rest of the PUD. The site where this would likely be developed is away from the pedestrian core and those amenities we discussed earlier. Additionally, we found that this did not really detract from the public health, safety, and welfare as it's located at a place in the PUD away from the central pedestrian area. We found that a drive-through type restaurant use would be consistent with other uses in the area. Up and down Rivery Boulevard, you do have restaurants. You have other restaurants within the PUD. And you do have restaurants and other banks and offices that do provide drive-through services across the street in Rivery as well. And then lastly, the property to be rezoned is suitable for the uses. Besides a large oak tree that would have to be protected, we did not find that the restaurant on the ideal site, excuse me, would not be feasible. There's enough space, and the applicant in some of their preliminary designs has shown that they can meet those queuing requirements. We also reviewed this to our 6 PUD approval criteria. The first one being providing a variety of uses, housing types, commercial services. Rivery already has a variety of commercial services in it, and this just further varies those uses, adding another one to the list. We did think that this was orderly and creative for the reasons already specified. We did give inclusion into the transportation system of partially complies, partly because it is off the area planned for vehicle traffic, but it is not quite well integrated into the development. This is not a corner necessarily planned for a building. And then again, provision of cultural recreational facilities. This would just be another amenity within the development. Location of building envelopes. This would be an interesting place where it could complement and balance the development across the street with Orange Theory, as well as provide another way to screen a portion of the parking lot that's visible from Rivery Boulevard. And then, of course, staging of development. This would likely be a single phase development. There would not be much concern about that. We did notify 36 property owners within the buffer, as well as about 130 property owners within the PUD itself. We did receive 5 comments in favor of the development, as well as 12 written comments opposed. So in summary, this is a public hearing and possible action on a request for zoning map amendment to amend the Summit at Rivery PUD for the property generally located at 1500 Rivery Boulevard. I, of course, am available for questions, as is the applicant.
Okay, thanks, Ethan. Commissioners, do you have any questions for staff on this item?
Hey, Ethan, so I understand the oak tree is staying, right?
As far as I know, yes. I believe it is classified as a heritage level tree. I'm getting a yes from the applicant, and so it is something they will be required to protect.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You
So
wanna-
Ethan, this is Commissioner Heitzman. Did the applicant consult with the residents of the brownstone of the conversion of a restaurant to a restaurant with a drive-through?
I believe he has spoken with some of them, but he may be able to go into greater detail than I can about that.
Okay. So is the applicant prepared to address the commissioners on the concerns about traffic in that area?
Yes, ma'am, he is.
Okay, great.
I forgot to mention, we also have our utility engineers here as well if we have questions about traffic.
Okay, any other questions for staff? If not, we can address questions of the applicant.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Sounds like Commissioner Heitzman has a question.
Yes, I'm just kind of curious. I mean, I'm very familiar with that area, very familiar with the brownstones. I know how tight traffic is and how tight parking is. I don't think there's any surprise with the multi-use of this area and with the inclusion of a restaurant. And I think people are looking forward to an additional restaurant. But this is a very walkable area. And I think that a lot of the residents have expressed a lot of concerns pertaining to the potential of a pedestrian vehicle accident, stacking of the vehicles in a drive-through in this particular area. Can you just go into a little bit more detail what you're envisioning here and why the conversion from your idea of a restaurant to that of including a drive-through?
So it was really driven in large part because of our issues right now. I say issues, I mean, this is for those of you that know me, I've lived in Georgetown for 30 years. I was here longer than most people in this room, for sure. And I think a lot of people who are here protesting what we're doing today are here because of what we did along with the city and the county to build this awesome development. I think that, this is a process. And so there's been issues from day one, issues in that when you're building a high density mixed use community that by design doesn't have street parking, that doesn't, that homeowners are supposed to park in their own homes, in their garages, that has limited additional public parking. We have an overall master parking plan that was presented and approved, 9 years ago for all these uses. And just to be clear, Ethan was, I don't mean to correct you, but Zone C was approved for a restaurant. So we, right now, in today's use, we can build a 5,000 square foot restaurant there. We decided not to. That's the highest and best use for that corner site for us. If we were talking about how much money can we get for that corner site, if we did something, or what we could get per square foot in leases, we'd be building another restaurant. My concern with that is that our community is so popular and our restaurants are so popular. We've got a great Italian food place coming, by the way, that'll open in a couple months. And you guys have probably all seen the parking garage that we're building as well. Two levels underground and 5 above ground. 100 plus of those will be public parking to help service our retail. So just so you know, we're abiding, and we're providing more parking spaces than our original parking plan required, even with this 5,000 square foot restaurant. I think it's important to note as well, my interest in my brownstone homeowners is real, right? So when we started this, everyone said there's no way, no one's, we built, developed, and paid for everything on that site. No outside developers. We've got, we always talk about the Sheraton. It was a $72 million project, but we got about $300 million of assets on the ground there. And it was a big step in faith for development, that we wanted to provide something that was super cool, that was more of a mixed use community, that had some of those things that I can tell you, for being a guy that lives out here and has lived there this long, it's hard for people to kind of turn the switch in their head and say, I got to park in a parking garage and walk to a restaurant, as opposed to being able to park right out front, right? Or in surface parking out in front. So there's been kind of a educational process that's gone on here as we continue to get more and more crowded there. That being said, our public garage that we all help pay for, right? That the city and the public and the county help pay for. Our top 2 floors are almost always empty unless we have big events going on at the hotel, and it is public, right? So we're getting more and more people used to parking there. We'll have more people used to parking in our public garage. But until all those spaces become available, we're going to have parking pressure, right? Right now, what we do for the brownstones is we've assigned spaces in that private lot that's out there to brownstone homeowners. And I would just say, this isn't a threat, but I can promise that, it is a reality. If we downsized this site so we could do like a little 1,800 square feet, Jim? Is that how big 2,300 square feet, as opposed to double that and do it in a little drive-through type of environment? And we want to provide something that's not a restaurant, right? So an email went out to everyone in the community by a homeowner that said, well, here we go. We're going to have a Chick-fil-A with queuing into the street, or a Taco Bell, or whatever it was going to be. And that's just not what we wanted. We tried to exclude fast food in our application, but Ethan pointed out we don't need to. We can just say restaurant general, because that in itself excludes fast food, right? So, we're thinking like a cool place, that you can get bagels and sandwiches, and there's only open till 3 o'clock, so that we don't have that parking through the evening, right? Like we would with a full service restaurant there. So we would have quite a bit more parking there. If we don't amend this PUD, the concerns about parking and queuing up and how crowded it's going to be is going to exponentially be worse. And that's what I don't want. So that's really the main reason we did it. We took that site, we split it in half, and we said, let's do a little office space. As far as the trees going as well, we've designed it around having outdoor seating for that tree, and for it to also still remain super walkable. So we won't have a lot of seating inside this drive-through. And so you guys know too, this isn't a build to suit. So the idea that there's something that we're going to slip in there that no one's going to like, this is something that we're super, super proud of. And we don't want to do anything that's going to make it anything less than what it already is. So this is not a money play at all. It's really a play for us to see what we can get into that site and give people the best opportunity to enjoy a different experience. So we don't know what it'll be yet. That's the God's honest truth. We don't know. It's a little bit like when we built the big silo building, and everyone said, why would you spend so much money on a building like that when you don't have a tenant? And we said, because we know what we want this to be when it grows up. And so it sat there for like 3.5 years, cost us a lot of money. But we've got an awesome place in it now that's really provided a bunch to our community. So that's our plan with this too. We don't have a built-in tenant. What we know is we don't want fast food. We know there's a place for a cool little bakery or a cool little, like voodoo type donut shop, or, we have a coffee place on site, but they open at 8 o'clock. I'm always at work before I can get a coffee at that place. So I don't consider that, your go-to coffee shop, to be honest with you, as much as I like Rivery Bakery. So that's why we're doing it. It's again, it's a site that we have a right to do a restaurant on as is, without any amendment. We're trying to make this thing better. Today, just so you know what it's used for right now, is our valet parking lot. And we have about 150 cars an evening that get run in and out of there by valet guys, right? So when you're talking about safety and, having something on that site that has less traffic and doesn't have that kind of car volume going in and out of it, they're going to be directed to the top floor of the hotel garage now. And we've also got some spaces reserved over at City Lights that we've leased from them so they can kind of get out of there. So we're doing the best we can until our new garage is finished, which should be February or so, when we start releasing some of those Summit lofts for lease. And it won't be long until we're done. So I sent an email to the entire community explaining to them what our goals were. I didn't consult with them. I know the commissioner asked if I consulted, but I did not consult, but I did respond to the concerns and let them know exactly what we're doing and why we're doing it. And it really is with their best interest in mind. It really is, because parking's been a problem for our Brownstone homeowners. So that's, I hope that answered your question. There was a long way around it, but the tree's staying. Was that the question I had?
That was mine.
Okay. Yeah, so.
Okay, any other questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you, Mr. Novak. Let's see. So at this time, we can open the public hearing. I've currently got 2 people signed up to speak on this item, I believe. So we can, first I've got Mr. Jerome Delacruz. Okay, so if you'll state your name, address, and you'll have 3 minutes to address the commission.
All right, thank you. My name is Jerome Dela Cruz, and I live at 3013 Adams in the Brownstones. And when we first received the notification, it was extremely vague. And I checked with some of the other property owners as well, and they agreed that it made no sense as written. So yes, it's correct. We were not consulted, but we were also issued something that was extremely vague until I asked and got a response back within 24 hours, which I really appreciate, as far as what was the specific request. All it had to do is include change from restaurant to restaurant with drive-through, and then we would have understood and got it. So something was amiss there, which led to a number of people to really take a look at and comment. Because we were not consulted, that's the reason why not only have I voted no, but a number of other people have declared no as well to the proposal. We would simply like to be consulted and reviewed as far as what is the best use of that space, because we are very concerned with the parking situation. We understand that that's going to potentially be improved in the future, but we also know what happens within development. It may not meet its intent. Our concern is not what it's going to look like today, what it's going to look like in 5, 10, 15 years from now, as well as beyond that. Concern also is we do not have very good egress in and out in terms of the brownstones. We do have to go all the way up by the Sheraton and then go up that road to have access to a traffic light. So if we have increased traffic due to a drive-through, understand now that it could be as designed for 10, but could be much higher. What that potentially could lead to is increased traffic in that area for us as residents to be able to get in and out of our residences as well. So that's something else to be considered. We also have a concern about the walking. We like to walk around the area. It gets very congested on certain evenings, particularly Friday, Saturday nights. And having a drive-through would also just increase the potential of having the near misses and God forbid, actual accidents from occurring. So we don't want that to happen. So right now, we just want to make sure and emphasize that it's not only just myself, but there's others that are not interested in the proposal as written. But we would like to work with Novak to come up with a mutual agreeable type solution in the future and go forward from there. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, the next speaker we have signed up is John Roth. So if you will give us your name and address, you will have 3 minutes as well.
Yeah, it's John Roth, 1000 High Knoll. Glad to be with y'all tonight. I'll be quick. Jerome hit on a number of the things, but I think safety is the number one thing, and getting in and off of Rivery Drive in a safe manner and having a drive-through right there. They're going to be coming back out right by the Orange Theory. And then if they come back out onto Rivery, if they turn right, they're fine. If they cross Rivery to turn left, it's hard enough now. And so what that's going to do is increase traffic that goes right back through to the Sheridan and out that street line. So also, Jeff mentioned about the restaurant opening up, which is going to be nice, the Italian food place. Problem is there's not enough parking, even right now. And so now we're talking about it, not just a fourth with the Italian, we're talking about a fifth being this pad site that whatever it's going to be. Whether it's a 5,000 square foot restaurant or a drive-through, there's still not enough parking. So that's my issues. And I don't know how you're going to queue up the people to come in and out of there in a safe manner out of that parking lot. It's just, it's poor planning on parking. So. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, Sophie, I don't see that we have anybody else signed up to speak. Is that correct? Nobody online?
I do not see any hands raised, nor do I see a chat requesting to speak.
Yep. Have you, sir, have you filled out?
Please excuse me, there is a hand raised now. It's
Oh, I see that.
William Harper just raised his hand.
Okay.
Mr. Harper, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Okay, if you will give us your name and address, we'll give you 3 minutes to speak.
William Harper, 333 Adams Street. And anything else you want?
No, sir, you may go ahead.
Thank you. I agree with my colleagues that our biggest concern is the traffic backup, depending on where the entrance and exit of a drive-through is. I noticed on your definition of a general restaurant that it required a 6-vehicle queue for a drive-through. And I, for one, would like to sort of see what the plan would be before we make a decision about this, because I don't really understand from what we've been told where the tail of that queue will be. And it's the only place it can really back up is either on that property. So that is going to slow down Rivery, or into the parking lot that is closer to the beginning of the brownstones, which is already congested because of parking for the businesses that are currently there. So I'm concerned about the backup from a drive-through window, and also how it's going to impact places that have been brought up to us in the past to expand parking. I'd like to make the comment that from my building to the Sheraton garage is a pretty good hike at 77, and we have no place for guests to park at this time. So with the addition of the Italian restaurant, it's going to be even more critical. And so depending on how this winds up being, our parking could be impacted, but even more so, it's a safety feature of how many cars are going to be backed up and where they're going to go. Okay.
Okay, thank you, sir. Ethan, could we have someone from the engineering department comment on traffic flow? Or is that something that's been looked at?
Certainly. We could have David Monk, our engineer, come up and speak about that.
I could tell he was eager to get up here and talk, so.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I'm David Monk. I'm the senior utility engineer, very senior. Now, when we considered how big the regular restaurant was going to be in relation to this, we just didn't see that that it would be a problem for the system. And we're going to certainly look at the queuing on the site when the site plan comes in, but we just didn't feel like this was going to be a bad change to the traffic from what was, already approved. Mhm.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have a question for staff?
Yeah, I guess my question is, and Mr. Monk, I may have let you get away too quickly. Is it, well, as you pointed out, the site plan, clearly is when you get into those details, but based on what we know now and that property being the hard corner
Mhm.
of two streets,
Mhm.
so traffic is already, there's traffic through that area already, obviously.
Mhm.
Do you really expect any further internal circulation beyond half a block or a block at most into the retail area? Do you expect any internal circulation of traffic as a result of that kind of development?
I don't, with what Mr. Novak explains, I don't think there's going to be an additional traffic, other than what is handled on site and in relation to what he could build. I think there won't be an additional of what could be built already.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah, go ahead.
So if I understand the whole thing, they could build 5,000 square foot Luby's or something like that, put that there, which is a sit down, is going to have more impact, traffic impact, because you're going to have people coming in and parking for 2 hours while they have dinner and drinks. And having all that ingress, egress. So that would have a more significant TIA
Mhm.
than something like an HTO that's going to be there, and they're going to be serving stuff from 6 a.m. so Jeff can get his coffee
Right.
until 2 or 3 in the afternoon, and they're done. So people coming home at 5 o'clock in the evening aren't going to be impacted by the traffic by this type of place.
That's the way we considered it. Yes. Mhm.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
You have a question?
Yeah. I've got a question and an observation. Depends upon what goes in there is going to be the traffic driver. If it's a fast food or is it a coffee shop? How many cars are going to be stacked in there?
Mhm.
I think the use is an important factor here of the traffic that it could generate.
And from what I understood, the use is controlled, that it can't be a fast food, and that's more of a planning, but that's what I understood. It's limited. It cannot be a fast food.
How about if it's a Starbucks? Starbucks packs them in a little more than most fast foods.
But when our UDC talks about restaurants general, it does use the term fast food, but it doesn't give any guidance on what exactly fast food means. So in that situation, there was a user coming in. That is where Ms. Nelson, as the planning director, has the authority to review that on a case-by-case basis and make a determination.
Well, if it's a sit-down restaurant, you've got people that live right next to it that will walk to it. as opposed to worrying about a lot of parking for assuming all the people are coming from off-site. So there's a benefit to the local people to have a sit-down restaurant. That's my observation.
Okay, any other questions for staff? If not, we can close public hearing and entertain a motion.
I move that we approve as presented.
Second,
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Warren. Second by Commissioner McCord. The public hearing is closed, so you would have needed to sign up at the time of public hearing. Okay, any discussion on this item? If not, we can call a vote. All those in favor? All those opposed? So motion carries 4-1.
Cherie, did you vote yea
Oh,
or nay?
I voted nay.
Okay, 4-2.
Okay, 4-2. Sorry, I forgot to look up there.
excuse me, Chairman Berthius.
Go ahead.
Do we need to do a voice vote since we're trying to do a hybrid meeting?
I think moving forward, a voice vote on all items is important.
Okay, I wasn't sure if we needed to roll call on that.
For the, if we can have our recording secretary or chair, please announce for the record who was in support and who was in opposition to this last report.
Yeah, we can just have it called out like we've done in the past on the Zoom meeting. That probably works best.
Right.
That way it gets recorded if you want to do that. Yes. And then starting on this next item, we'll start with AZ. When we get to the vote, we'll let you call the roll on the voting. Okay. Yeah, we need to get Commissioner Stanley. Okay, our next item is item AZ, and is that Mr. Acosta?
Am I on? Can y'all hear me all right? Hello. This is the first time I get to meet y'all in person. This is very exciting. Nice to meet
Welcome
y'all.
to the party.
Glad to be here. Yeah, so today I'm presenting for you case 2021-4 Annex. And this is an initial zoning request for a 10-acre tract that is currently in the ETJ, but if annexed, they're requesting a density or low density multifamily MF1 zoning district for the property generally located at 200 Hillview Lane. I'm not sure we're seeing your screen. Sorry, apparently we're experiencing technical difficulty again. Sorry. My apologies, everyone. First time. So as I said, this is an initial zoning request for a low-density multifamily zoning district for the property generally located at 200 Hillview Lane. Our property is located just east of FM 1460, north of Westinghouse Road, and if brought into the city limits would be in District 7. On the ground today, you can see that it would be close to the La Cantera neighborhood, which is a planned unit development of residential single-family homes. Most of the homes would be separated by Nacharita Drive, and the 8 homes here who would be the closest neighbors to the development are separated by a 15-foot buffer that's required for MF1 zoning when it's close to RS, in addition to a 20-foot setback from the properties for MF1 and the 10-foot setback from the homes here. So there's a good degree of separation between what would be developed and the existing neighborhood. The remaining surrounding area is in the ETJ, and there's only really this former auto dealership here that's currently in the area, and the remainder is undeveloped. Looking towards the future, though, we can see that the vast majority of the subject property in the area around it is in the mixed density neighborhood, which is meant to support a mix of single family and medium density uses or residential use and some commercial. And then to the north of it is a regional center meant to accommodate both large realtors and then a higher intensity of residential and commercial uses. Also here is a, you can see from our overall transportation plan, West Ridgeline Boulevard is meant to be a collector road that connects FM 1460 to Maple Street. And this development, if approved, would get us a little bit closer to extending that road and would build out West Ridgeline from Naturita to the western extent of its property. And this is also just a good example of what a good transition could be, because this would be kind of a more moderate medium density development next to where at the one hand you have those set existing lower density uses, and then on the left would be the higher intense proposed existing uses down the road. And this would be kind of a buffer between them, giving that gradation from higher to lower density use. And this is the area that we've kind of surrounded, bounded by the major arterials in the area that our subject property is included in. It's about 10 acres, or just a little less than 1% of the total area. And again, the majority of it is mixed density neighborhood. So when we look at our target ratios for the area, this would move us just a little bit closer towards our goal of 80%, which is the proposed residential target ratio for this area, from 69 to 70, and still leaving about 28% of the overall area agricultural or unentitled. Plenty of room for it to grow into the 20% goal for non-residential uses in that zone. And again, this is the existing zoning for the area right now. So as we said, there's a good example for how this can be a transition from the residential zoning district to the, to the right here, and the currently ETJ and agricultural district to the left. And 1460 is actually in our comprehensive plan designated as an urban corridor, which is meant to support more of those medium densities and medium density and commercial uses, along with providing for a safe pedestrian crossing. And this is what low density MF1 allows for. So attached and detached multifamily units, apartments, condos, triplexes. And then I do want to note here in the dimensional standards that several of the dimensional standards allowed for or required in MF1 are similar to or the same to the existing RS zoning. So the building height, for example, is 35 feet for both of them. The front street setback is the same, 20 feet for both of them. And then the building separation for both is about 12 feet. The development is looking to only do what is permitted by right, so multifamily attached and multifamily detached development. And when we looked at the UDC criteria for approval, they complied. They gave us a completed application, and after review found that it was sufficient. The zoning change we did find to be consistent with the comprehensive plan in relation to it being a good example of a transition and providing new typologies of housing in the area where they don't exist, and extending Ridgeline to its destiny of connecting Maple Street to FM 1460. We did also find that it would help promote the health, safety, and general welfare of the city and the safe, orderly, and healthful development of the city. Because this is the first time multifamily or a higher density of uses will be used in that area, we said that it only partially complies with being compatible with the present zoning and conforming uses of nearby property. But we find that it was in compliance and being suitable for the uses permitted by the district and would be applied by the proposed amendment. We sent out 74 notifications to property owners in a 300-foot buffer around the subject property. The Sun did publish on June 20th notice of this zoning, and there was one sign posted near the property. To date, we've not received any comment from the public about it. So in summary, we are here asking for an initial zoning of MF1 low-density multifamily for this 10-acre tract, should it be approved for annexation by the city. I'm here for any questions you may have, and I believe in the likely event that I can't answer it, the engineer is also here to answer questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, do you have any questions for staff on this item? I have a question. So although this property doesn't encompass everything between Ridgeline Boulevard and 1460, but development of this property would require them to build Ridgeline Boulevard through their property
That is correct. That is correct. So
up
if-
to the adjacent property or to where?
to the western edge of their property. Yeah. So from Naturita to about right here, they'd be required to build out.
Okay. Is the applicant here? They have a presentation, they'll speak.
The applicant is here. They did not have a presentation, but they can answer questions.
Okay. Commissioners, do you have any questions for the applicant?
Yeah. I'm looking for a map that shows me where La Cantera is connected to 1460 today. Is that further to the south of this one?
I believe La Cantera,
It is.
yeah.
It's further south from where this map shows.
Mhm.
The, is Nutrita or what is that?
Naturita Street or
Is
Naturita Drive,
that
sorry.
a minor collector or what is that?
That is considered a local street.
The local street?
West Ridgeline would be the collector.
Pardon me?
West Ridgeline Boulevard would be the one considered a major a collector.
Okay. All right, so that's going to be the main egress, ingress for the low density multifamily?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
So they'll take access at this point through Hillview Road until West Ridgeline Boulevard's completed. Is that correct?
If they decide to build to the full maximum capacity for the area, they'll need 2 access points into the street, and they've indicated that they do want to try and reach their full capacity. I believe the applicant could tell you better where those connectors are or where those entrance points are supposed to be.
Hi, Josh Barron with JAB Engineering. The primary access will be off of Hillview until the road is extended. I mean, that's the short answer.
Right.
We'll need 2 points of access once I'm trying to remember off the top of my head what the number is, but once we exceed the number of units for that second point for fire, but we would take a secondary access through the neighborhood of primary off of Hillview.
So there would be access from the east off of Hillview.
The Hillview is a private road that this property shares an access easement with.
Right.
So they'll be able to upgrade that road to a normal small street section and driveway.
Okay.
Was that the question?
Yeah, well, I guess my main question was, will there be access from the east and the west?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it'll be to the south when the road is extended along the southern boundary.
Right.
That way the main entrance when the road is extended all the way to the west, they can take the main entrance and shift it from Hillview to that location.
So is Hillview going to be built now with the development?
Hillview will be upgraded with the development. Yes, that'll come in with the site plan application.
Okay.
Any other questions for the applicant? If not, we can open the public hearing. I don't have any cards.
Mr. Chair, I don't mean to be contrary to the applicant, but the city of Georgetown and Williamson County do not recognize Hillview as a public road. So to count their points of ingress and egress, Hillview would not count towards those connection requirements. We've conveyed to the applicant that in order to meet the connections required by the UDC, it would require access to Ridgeline Boulevard and Naturita. So in order to meet those connection requirements, we would not count Hillview.
But that is, West Ridgeline Boulevard is part of the initial development of that tract.
if the applicant wishes to develop to the total number of units allowed in the zoning district, then they would require 2 connection points, and those would be required to come off of Ridgeline and Naturita.
Thank you.
Yeah, if I may, just to clarify, we're talking about 2 different, there's a fire requirement and a UDC requirement for 2 points of connection. We will take our main connection off of Hillview until the road is upgraded to reach all the way to the west. So we will still have 2 other connections. So ultimately there'll be 3 connections until the road is connected, the boulevard is connected all the way to the west, if that makes sense.
Right. So what you're saying is you could go down Naturita and turn left or right into the development, or you could go up and then take Ridgeline and turn in.
So to be clear, what Nat is saying, we would need a point of connection onto Naturita. We would also need a point of connection onto
West Ridge,
West Ridgeline. Sorry, I can't see.
which will
Oh,
not
it's
be
right here
a
in front of me.
complete
Yep.
road. Okay.
Correct, yeah.
Cool.
Now, our main access to the development will start on Hillview, but that will not count towards our 2 points of connection from the UDC standpoint.
Okay.
I believe Commissioner Heinzman would like to speak as well.
Okay. Commissioner Heinzman, do you have a question?
No, I don't. Sophia, I was just responding to a direct question you were asking me about mic volume, so I apologize.
And we
I have no question.
We do have somebody signed up for public comment, though.
Online?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
The
So we can open the public hearing.
Nicholas, you have your hand raised. Would you like to make public comment?
Yeah, I guess I had a quick question. My name is Nicholas Baltadano. I live at 100 Hillview Road. I guess I just wanted to make sure, because I heard a comment that Hillview Road would be upgraded. That street is extremely small. It's completely one way. And I guess what were the plans on upgrading it? If it can only, from what I can see anyways, only have one car going one way at a time. If I'm trying to leave my house and someone's trying to come up, we have to essentially pull off into someone's yard. So what was the plan with that?
So Sophia, tell me if I'm wrong, but that would be a staff question, and that would be at the time of site plan question. We're talking about zoning here, so.
We're talking about zoning, yes, sir. Given this is public comment, we aren't here to address any questions directly unless the commission would like to direct that question to staff for a response.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to make, I'm not addressing their question other than to say that information or that question is not part of the information we're talking about this evening. Okay.
My apologies. I guess, and then, so I can only ask about the zoning. Was it like, was it gonna be like, is there a plan submitted for this, or is it just strictly on the zoning?
So the request is just for zoning of the property.
Okay, I guess. Sorry, I got muted. Was I supposed to speak, or did you guys want me to be muted?
If you have any other comments, you still have time. Otherwise.
Oh, okay, cool. No, I was gonna say, was it supposed to be, or is the plan right now to make it like duplexes, or is it more apartment? Or is that not regarding to the zoning?
So I think at this time, all the information in regards to the application is available online. So you should be able to pull it up. There's a presentation and all the information pertaining to this item.
All right, cool. Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
And
Okay.
we're certainly happy to provide, if the speaker would like to contact the planning department, we're happy to provide that information. And I know that development engineer is also willing to provide that contact information if we can follow up with the speaker.
Okay, thanks, Nat. Okay, we'll close public hearing and the floor is open to a motion.
This is Doug Noble. Make a motion to approve request for zoning map amendment to zone upon annexation 10-acre tract of land out of the William Madison Survey Abstract Number 21 to the low-density multifamily MF1 zoning district for the property generally located at 200 Hillview Lane, east of FM 1460.
Stanley, second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Noble, second by Commissioner Stanley. Any discussion on this item? If not, would you like to call the roll? Yes.
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 Commissioner Haney,
Yes.
Commissioner Warren,
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Noble,
Yes.
and Commissioner Stanley.
Yes.
Okay, so that motion passes. I've got 7-0. Okay, so the next item is BA, so you are up.
Okay. Looking at item number BA on the legislative agenda. Thank you. Mr. Harwell?
All right, good evening. I'm good at one thing at a time.
You're good at a lot of things.
All right. Thank you for your patience again. This is a request to rezone approximately 0.662 acres on Spring Street in North Georgetown from the residential single-family zoning district to the low-density multifamily zoning district. The property in question is directly behind the intersection of Williams Drive and Austin Avenue. So if you come across the bridge, you'll recognize the auto parts store and restaurant there. The property we're discussing this evening is directly behind that, in the middle of the established neighborhood. To the north, you have the little Zydeco Ice shop, as well as an empty house, or excuse me, a house. Behind that, you have the Brookwood and Georgetown development surrounded by homes. Just cut outside this picture is Second Street with the light at Austin Avenue. If you go across Austin Avenue, you go over to the new Performing Arts Center and the Mexican food restaurant whose name escapes me. If you come down Second Street through this neighborhood, you would see homes as well as some duplexes and triplexes on your left before you pass Bob's Catfish into San Gabriel Park. If you look at our future land use map, this neighborhood sits within our special area drawn around a Williams Drive gateway plan. Other areas in the city are designated as, regional center or community center, mixed density neighborhood. But the special area designation is placed here because we have a different vision for Williams Drive. The tan color in this property sits is our high density mixed housing area. So within the Williams Drive Gateway Plan, development here is intended to be denser and more mixed use in nature, somewhat similar to what we've seen at Rivery Boulevard with vertically mixed use developments rather than horizontally mixed use developments. Maxing out density, you can expect to see more multi-story buildings, more structured parking, as well as those vertically mixed use buildings with retail or other commercial activities on the first floor or taller. Here in the high density mixed housing designation, it does promote a density of 16 dwelling units per acre plus, primarily as a medium density residential product. So typically here in Georgetown, we see that in the MF1 district, up to 14 dwelling units an acre. Generally with our current zoning districts, anything larger than 14 is generally seen as more higher density rather than it is more medium density. Within this district, you may see excuse me, within the vision set by this future land use designation, you may see vertically mixed use buildings. However, a denser single family product like townhomes or three-story apartments may be appropriate. If we look at the land use ratios called for by this, excuse me, by this future land use ratio, it does call for an 80% residential designation. Here in this neighborhood, you would see with the commercial development along Austin Avenue, you are just over a quarter of the property within this area being used for commercial purposes. This property is currently zoned RS, so it would fall into that 75% that you see there on the screen. The zoning around the property is pretty much what you would expect. You see high density, excuse me, general commercial C3 zoning on the Brookwood properties, as well as those properties fronting along Austin Avenue. And you see the single family zoning to the rear throughout the neighborhood. Those duplexes and triplexes I mentioned earlier are a non-conforming use. They are zoned residential single family, although they are used as more multifamily type uses. The development being requested tonight is our low density multifamily district that Cesar just discussed with y'all over off FM 1460. It is not intended to provide a incredibly high density development with 14 units an acre. Given this property is about 0.66 acres, that would entitle the developer here to about 9 units. Excuse me, our purpose statement for this district does encourage it to be located near major thoroughfares. This property is, of course, located right off Austin Avenue. If you want to leave this neighborhood through a signaled intersection, you would just go a few blocks south to 2nd Street. Also, like Cesar mentioned, the MF1 dimensional standards are very similar to those of the residential single-family zoning district, mainly differing in the buffering and distance standards that are required when adjacent to other single-family residential. On this block, all the adjacent single-family zoning would be across the street, and so you would not really see these buffer yards, but you would see compliance with screening requirements for things like parking and dumpsters. You would see compliance with our lighting standards to protect against glare, and you would see compliance with our building design standards in our MF1 zoning district. Excuse me. The district does allow attached uses, attached units, like your traditional apartment or townhome, as well as detached uses like you typically see in a single family condo regime. In general, we found that it fully complied with 4 of our 5 zoning criteria and partially complied with 1. The application was complete. The applicant did give us enough information to review. We did find that this did promote orderly development by appropriately transitioning from higher intensity auto-related uses along Austin Avenue and the Williams Drive intersection back into the neighborhood by providing a commercial, moderate density residential, and then single-family residential transition of uses, excuse me, as well as being somewhat compatible with the existing single-family zoning, as it is still a residential use and the dimensional standards are somewhat the same. And then we did not see any reason why the proposed use cannot be developed here on the property. There are no man-made features, no natural features that would really be prohibitive. There are several heritage trees on the property, but are either located in the right-of-way or very close to the right-of-way, and could easily be worked around by the developer. The one approval criteria that we found that it partially complied with is compliance with the comprehensive plan. The Williams Drive Gateway Plan does set some lofty goals for density and development that may be accommodated in different places where that land use designation is appropriate, further up Williams Drive or places where it has frontage directly on Austin Avenue. But here, that 16 dwelling units an acre, especially with a property of this size, may not be totally appropriate simply because you'd have to go to our MF2 district to be able to get there. And then we have those size constraints. But the MF2 zoning is a step in the right direction towards fulfilling the goals of those plans. We did notify 25 property owners within our 300-foot buffer, and we have received 26 letters back. 25 of those were opposed and one was in favor. And just as an informational tool for you guys tonight, this does not directly affect your vote tonight, but it will affect the vote of the council here in the next few weeks. State law prescribes a certain threshold by where if enough property owners within the buffer, 200-foot state mandated buffer, excuse me, object, then council will require a supermajority to approve. So approximately 55% of the land, not the landowners, but owners of 55% of the land within the buffer have opposed. So just so that y'all are aware, if you do make a recommendation for council to approve, they will require a supermajority vote, 3/4 vote. Excuse me. So in summary, this is a 0.66 acre property. The request is to go from residential single family to low density multifamily. Of course, I'm here for questions, as is the applicant, and the applicant does have a short presentation.
So the application is for low density. The city map shows it ought to be high density.
Yes, sir. Higher density.
Okay, so it'd be higher than what the applicant is asking for now.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
So Nathan, this is Sheree. Just to clarify, the applicant is asking to rezone barely over a half an acre from residential to low density multifamily. However, when you look at the definition, it looks like he's asking to move from a residential single family to high density based on trying to put 6 buildings on barely little over a half acre lot. Is that what I'm hearing? So this is really a high density, correct?
The definitions of medium and high density are somewhat relative. Placing the number of units on the property that the applicant is requesting may appear to be high density because you are placing quite a number of units and multi-story units, in fact, with each other. And so final product may appear to be high density and may feel high density. But in terms of what we see throughout the city and relative to what we consider here quite often, this is a moderate density product. Your traditional walk-up apartment complex out on Williams Drive will generally be in the 18 to 24 unit range. And here we are looking at the probably 14 to 18 range. So this does sit a little bit less dense than your traditional apartment complex.
Excuse me, Ethan, I'm still confused. At a total of 14 units per acre, which is required by MF1, we are working with barely 2/3 of an acre here, which seems to me that it would limit it to 9 units. I can't figure out how we're getting to, although I realize the zoning, I mean, this is really beside the point on the zoning, but I still can't figure out how the applicant could build that many units on MF1 zoned property if rezoning is approved.
He will definitely not get the 14. He will be capped at the 9. 9 units. He will not get the 14 because he doesn't have a full acre. But from there, it's a matter of site planning and just fitting all the puzzle pieces together.
Well, he could just build 2 quads and he's done.
Correct.
I mean, it's real easy to put quads on 6/10 of an acre.
Didn't he have this drawn out last time we saw it? Wasn't there a conceptual plan included in the program
I'm not sure about last time, but I believe he does have one
for
today
tonight?
to show you. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'd like to see it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ethan. And we want to thank the P&Z members and the neighbors and for their input. We've been involved with the neighbors. I've put together a slideshow to sort of show my vision for my property and a little bit about who I am. So here we go. First of all, Georgetown's my home. I'm a third generation, longtime resident of Georgetown. My family moved here back in the 1940s. I'm married. My wife's here. I have 2 daughters. We reside in Old Town. Like I said, Georgetown's home, and I'm an owner of a small business. Is adjoining this land as well. It's located at 903 North Austin Avenue. So my last P&Z meeting was to do the improvements to what I refer to as the gateway to the neighborhood. As you'll see on the slide, this was the before of the retail center before I purchased it, and to the right is the current picture, and that is also where I will have my office at. As Ethan had a similar slide, I just show a slightly different perspective to show the proposed cottage house site rezone. If you start on the left, that's big. They have a retail center, and if you move from there to the right, Big also has a apartment. I believe that's on Myrtle Street house. And if you back up from there, there's a snow cone and abandoned house that neighbors my site. It's zoned C3. And if you move up to Church Street here, these are single family houses. Then back around, there's a Stieras restaurant. It's a Mexican food restaurant. And then the retail center that I've recently renovated, which I refer to as the gateway to the area. So my site that I wish to propose for the rezone is surrounded, or I'm sorry, is adjoined by all tracks that are zoned C3. So here's the proposed plan that Chris touched on. It shows 6 footprints and a total of 9 units. The proposal is all 1 bedrooms. And this is what we envision for that site. Some of the neighbors are here. I believe it was last week. We had a neighborhood meeting where I presented information and wanted to gather input from the neighbors and have their involvement. So we had a long, productive discussion. I think at the end of the meeting, we asked all the neighbors what it was that they did not like about the project. And I listed here 1 through 6. This is in no order, but just what they said. Public safety, there's traffic, the design of the buildings. They were also worried about it being rental as opposed to maybe single family where you have a different clientele. Also, they were worried the area of the land, they were concerned it was too small. And lastly, was also said that a cottage house community would be possibly the lesser of 2 evils. So the next slide are sort of how I want to address their concerns. So the action items on the public safety is I feel that by providing the new product, it will actually increase the safety by the way of lighting and sidewalks. That area doesn't have many sidewalks or any at all, and the lighting is very limited as well. Next was, traffic. I think we're all concerned about traffic. It's hard to envision this being a big, traffic driver having 9 one-bedroom units. So I don't envision that as a big traffic driver. That my engineer has some numbers that he might be helpful on that. We took in their input on the design. My thought is it will be in line with the retail center that I recently improved. So this is intended to be an upscale development and add value to the area. And then the single family houses versus a cottage, multi-family renter aspects. As Georgetown's changed, I think living needs have as well. And by having a more efficient use of the land, it allows a higher end design. And then the land area being too small, it's just a percentage. So it's, if it was 10 acres, it would be the same percentage as 0.66. Then lastly, the lesser of two evils. I don't view either one as evil, but the idea is to kind of, we're all in the same boat here and wanting to add value to the overall area. We took in their input of they were concerned about the integrity and character of the design, and I put together a vision board, and I think this will coincide with the neighborhood, and this is what we intend to build. The middle one being the picture from the site plan. I think it's also worthy to state that I have a vested interest here, that I will be overlooking this by the way of my office window. So I am the most direct neighbor, and we will have a vested interest to have a nice product for and continued quality of living. Also the traffic. So right now the zoning allows for 4 single family houses. So we're proposing essentially 2 more footprints. So go from, right now we're allowed 4 single family houses. There's 4 lots, all zoned single family. We want to add 2 more additional footprints. So this is sort of a hypothetical. If you build 4 houses at 4 bedrooms, you would have 16 bedrooms. So what I'm proposing is 9 units, all 1 bedrooms, 9 total bedrooms. Each units will be around 650 square feet. One benefit to a multifamily zoning is it will allow for more parking, and also we're proposing some public parking, which you'll see on the next slide. And the overall footprint, the cottages will have fewer square feet than single family houses. So here's the parking as it states. There's the city's requirement is 17 spaces. We will provide 23 spaces. Parking along Church Street right here, there's 7 that would be available for public parking. Also the walkability, I feel like it's a safety issue where we will provide sidewalks, which will hopefully improve the walkability. And there's Big is down the street, and they would improve their walkability as well. There are some heritage oak trees sort of around the outskirts. We'll definitely be saving all those and have it up where they're all saved and worked around. I think it's also important to talk about the transition. So I think it's smart to have like a step down, like there's transition where up front is the Gateway Retail Center. And what I'm proposing to step down to a multifamily, and then a single family behind the multifamily. The cottages will also provide a buffer between the neighborhood retail center and single family. So without this transition, say if it doesn't get passed, you'd be sticking single family houses right up against C3 zoning. And, the future land use plan, as Ethan touched on, it calls for the high density mixed use. Also, they would like to see 80% residential and 20% non-residential. I think the cottages would, they would be able to be 100% residential and fit in with the neighborhood better than a mixed use development where you could have residential on top and some sort of a commercial space on the bottom. The multi-family zoning would eliminate that, making mine 100% residential. Also, the zoning map, which we've already touched base on, but as you can see, there's commercial in the area, and this would be the first multifamily transitioning down from the commercial. Also made a checklist, just in summary. It's a smaller footprint, which allows for bigger possibilities. We'll have more parking and public parking. Also, the landscaping requirement per the city will be higher than single family. It's a net less building square foot. We also have the step down in zoning, along with improving the downstream water flow for the storm water. So that's all I have, and I'm here to answer the questions.
Commissioners, any questions for the applicant?
Hey, Tyler, how you doing?
Hey, Jay.
Are you going to be doing these as a condo regime? This actually is kind of different than the P&Z. Are you going to do it as a condo regime? Or are these going to be for sale units, or are they going to be?
No, so they'll all be for lease. We're not doing a replat, just strictly a rezone. There's no condo regime, no.
Any other questions for the applicant?
Yes, this is Commissioner Heitzman. First of all, Mr. Fusco, thank you for your presentation and also for taking the time to meet with the surrounding neighborhood. I know there's quite a few concerns that have been expressed. So I'm sure they appreciated you talking to them. I just wanted to verify again that we're talking not about cottage homes that you're going to sell, which has more stability to offer into neighborhood, but these will be rental units. We'll have 9 units on a little over a half an acre. And also you're stating 23 parking spaces. And you don't feel that's going to add congestion to the single family neighborhood?
It's a total of 9 units. And would you tell me what you mean by congestion?
Congestion, the parking. When I'm looking at, are we talking about 2 parking spots per 3 parking spots per cottage home?
Are you able to see the parking site plan proposed here?
Okay, I'm seeing it right now. Thank you.
So I do not feel like it will be a big traffic, driver, especially all being one bedrooms. Some will be 2-story units where the residents are able to park under their unit, which is one way how we were able to configure the design to allow for more parking.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? Any additional questions for staff? Once Mr. Harwell's still handy. Hearing none, we can open the public hearing. And I have several folks signed up to speak. The first one I have in front of me is Ms. Braddock. And if you will confirm your name and address for us, you have 3 minutes to speak. And the recording secretary will let
Thank
you know when your time is up.
I believe I have 6. I've got donated time.
I'm sorry?
I believe I have 6 minutes. I've got donated time.
Oh, I see. Has someone ceded their time to you?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
For the record, is it, can you state who?
There's Liza Weckworth and Amber Moreno, and I believe Brad Childers.
Are those people here in attendance?
2 are on the call. Well, Amber's phone died, but Liza's on the call and Brad's back there.
Thank you. I do have, for the record, in the chat, I do have Eliza Trevino.
Trevino, yes.
Who was willing to give Jen of 106 East Spring Street
Yes, ma'am.
her time.
Okay. Yes, Ms. Braddock, you have 6 minutes.
All right. Well, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you for letting me speak. First and foremost, I speak for the majority of my neighbors. Public safety is number one. If you look on this design here, you see Spring Street a little bit wider, but you look at Church Street, it's a very narrow road. We feel that building 6 buildings containing 9 units will be detrimental to the neighborhood because although Mr. Wolf is targeting single professionals, maybe somebody who attends university or whatever, it's likely is going to be at least 2 people per unit, which means at least 2 vehicles per unit. If you look at the parking where he has it behind his building, you see workers work there. And it looks like he's going to redesign that a little bit and they'll have to maybe move where they park. But in front of it where you see most of the parking occurs in front of the San Pedro Limon restaurant there. And then people park along where now the construction is going on. But public safety and traffic, we don't have any sidewalks. And although he is going to build sidewalks, it's just going to be around that corner. It's not the rest of the neighborhood. Right now, Church Street, that parking that he's proposing along Church Street, when you back up, is going to take up, I mean, really, it's a very narrow street to try and back in and out of. I mean, my house is right across the street from this at 106 Spring Street. And I have a driveway that, backs into Church Street, and I have a hard time backing out if somebody is parked across the street from me. So there's a concern there. We already have a lot of traffic with the construction that's going on at Austin Avenue and Williams Drive and 35. A lot of people cut through Church Street to go around that congestion and all the way to Morrow Street, take a right, and then make their way to Austin Avenue. We don't think that they've really shown, the applicant do appreciate you guys meeting with us last week, but we don't we don't think that they've shown that they could really have very much control over the number of people that park there. And, if we're targeting young professionals, let's face it, there's going to be parties and more parking. Public parking is going to be filled by whomever wants to park there. So then where are the residents and their friends and visitors going to park? They're going to park along Spring Street. I already mentioned about Church Street, Morrow Street, and sometimes East Valley being a racetrack. I mean, with the improvements that have been made to St. Gabriel Park, which we all love, it does become quite a racetrack as people are leaving the park and they don't want to wait in whatever traffic, so they kind of zoom through the neighborhood. We don't have a lot of lighting. We don't have any sidewalks. And we don't have any speed control, like no speed bumps, no speed signs, anything like that. So again, I don't think there's going to be, I don't think they'll be able to accommodate the amount of parking that just even 9 bedrooms is going to generate, even though he does have, I think, 2 buildings, like you said, that are going to be parking under. Finally, the proposed development that he's wanting to do does not fit with the neighborhood. We do have, as Ethan mentioned, we do have 3 multifamily units in the neighborhood, and they're down on Morrow Street. 2 are single or 2-story duplexes that are zoned single family, grandfathered in, I guess. And then the other one is a quad that's on a commercial lot. We already have that in the neighborhood. I don't believe that we need another one, especially 2-story. Again, everything else is 1-story. And I don't think the zoning change that he's requesting is consistent with the rest of the neighborhood. I know it's on the 2030 plan, but I don't think it's consistent. I don't think there's, like the commissioner said, such a small lot to put so many buildings, to have so many people living there, I think is detrimental to the neighborhood. It's a lot of families in the neighborhood, a lot of young children. The school bus picks up kids in front of my house on Church Street, which just below where you can't see there. So our preferences, and we did discuss this last week, our preference is keep it single family and build single family homes is what we would prefer to keep in keeping with the neighborhood. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard Crowley. If you will, just give us your name and address when you approach the podium. Thank you.
My name is Richard Crowley, 709 North Church Street. Thanks for letting me speak this evening. I appreciate it. First off, I agree with the previous speaker on all of the technical points that she made. The neighborhood is overwhelmingly single-family homes, single-story. And my house is 60 feet from the proposed development, diagonally across the intersection. So I'm very close to it. Church Street is extremely narrow. You cannot park a vehicle in front of my house at all. And I've got a heritage oak, which is 30 inches from the edge of the street. So the street can't be widened. And the way that water drains down in front of my house and where that oak tree is, there's no way that a sidewalk could be put there. So I know the sidewalks are going only on that development, the proposed development. So it's not going to assist any of the congestion or narrow street issues that we're having people walk in the streets now through the neighborhood. Why we bought, we love the neighborhood. It's quiet, it's peaceful. It has a really unique charm to it. When we purchased the home several years ago, we did look into zoning on some of the vacant lots and were reassured that it was single family homes. So we went ahead with that understanding and made the purchase of the home, and we're very happy to be in the community. The house that I live in was built in 1947, and several other homes in the neighborhood are very charming, and that's what I think is very appealing. I have really 2 reasons to oppose this. One would be the safety issue of the traffic, of the congestion, of people having to walk in the streets. That's a big one. And the multifamily rental units is just simply not a fit for this particular community. I have a suggestion, and it is stay with the residential zoning the way it is, single family, and perhaps consult with one of the really premier builders who's done so much infill in Georgetown, has had articles published in The View, Chance Lee. And Chance would be more than happy to consult perhaps with his architect and offer some ideas on some single family home alternatives to what's being proposed currently. So I have nothing else. I appreciate you listening, and thanks for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Crowley. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble. Demetrio Perez? If you'd care to come up, Mr. Perez? Oh, well, I'm not sure. Someone did.
I'm gonna make it short, maybe even less than 3 minutes, okay? I live in 907 North Myrtle. I live right behind Big. And already, we have a church there. They rent out part of the property for the church, and it's very congested on Sundays. And not only that, it's like Jen says, people come down North Austin Avenue, cut through our neighborhood. And sometimes people drive, it's like 20 miles an hour zone through the park. There's no police that go there. But if you go down at the park, and if you set a police there in Myrtle and Spring, man, this, they could have their budget in 1 year. Because people speed. They speed through my street. I live right behind Big, and there's people speeding through there all the time. And the citizens of this, they don't call them students, they're citizens that go to Big. They walk the streets, and people are driving through there, and they come, mostly it's the traffic. That's my concern, and the speed. There's no speed signs. They put one in the park, but they don't put any in our residential areas. And there's drainage. If you could sit in my house, in front of my house for 2 minutes, like the other day that it rained, poured, it flooded my yard with all that rain. When they put Big there, they never have enough drainage. And there's more parking lots, more drain. Where's the rain? Where's the rain gonna go to? Where's the water? And he's, like I said, he's only gonna put sidewalks around there. I don't have a sidewalk in front of my house. And if you put a sidewalk in front of my house, from my front door to the city, where the city allows a sidewalk, it'd be like 5 feet, 10 feet. But mostly, I agree with Jen, it's just the traffic and the speed that the people go through. Because they don't want to go up to the traffic light at Sonic when they can cut through our side, through our narrow streets. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Press. Sue Mirzai.
Hi, my name is Sue Mirzai, and I live in 807 North Myrtle Street, close to Mr. D's house. Yep. And as he mentioned, we already have a lot of problem with the Big. There is a lot of traffic there. On Sunday, they rent it to the church. There is no empty spot in our street, and then Jen's Street, they park all over. And the design they showed us, it's such a nice design, but it doesn't match with our neighborhood. That's such a nice design if you drive to the Scenic Drive with the view, with the, that's such a nice match with that area, but not in our neighborhood. We don't have enough, if you look at the street, it's an old part of the Georgetown, it's a old town. The street is so narrow. And with the 9, they called cottage house, I call them box house. It just, and with these days, with the lifestyle, at least 2 people gonna live there. And each person has 2 cars. And it's gonna be crowded. And in our neighborhood, we don't have a HOA. At the first, like Big promised us, we're gonna keep this area clean, and we're gonna cut the grass, do this and that. And if you come and check our next to us, the grass is tall, there is a lot of branches there, and they didn't take care of those. And I know it's gonna be with the rental house, with the all promise, we're gonna turn up to the big story again. And with the traffic, it's not a good place for the cottage home. I think most of us, we are agree with the 4 single houses, and it's gonna be a less traffic. And with the sidewalk, as Mr. D mentioned, most of the time, the resident of the Big, they just walk around, and most of them, they are disabled, and they need at least 2 people, they are with them and take care of them. And with the traffic, it doesn't work for our neighborhood, that design you put it for the cottage home there. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mirzai? And I want to ask, we have a few more speakers, so if you would, please, if you could address any items that we
Yes, ma'am.
haven't already heard about, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, I make it as
And we appreciate your input.
as short as possible. This neighborhood is very popular neighborhood. I explain why. There is a Papa John's pizza place that drivers in and out delivering pizza. There is an event center for wedding and events that going on all the time. There is a big center there that have a lot of people bring their kids or citizens to the building in the morning and pick them up later on, and they walk around in the neighborhood. And more than that, they rent it to a church called Antioch. And on Sundays, there is no place to park. And then there is in front of right where the gentleman purchased, there is a Mexican food that Sundays especially is extremely popular. So that, and the Chamber of Commerce is also next to us. So that makes that neighborhood extremely populated and popular. So basically, I don't know how they can put in that little spot 24 spots for the parking. All those streets are narrow, and they are talking about sidewalks, greenery, and the parkings, and 9 buildings. That's all I can say.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I apologize. Sometimes I have trouble with handwriting. Brad Childress?
I'm Brad. I live at 704 North Myrtle, and I'll make it quick. I know everybody's ready to go home, but man, this is a great neighborhood. And if you look why people move to Georgetown, this is like one of the places that's so cool. Like, I want y'all to come drive through it sometime. And this project just, it doesn't fit in our neighborhood. That's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Sophia, do we have anyone online who?
I do not
is
see
signed
any
up to speak?
hands raised or anybody indicating in the chat they'd like to speak on this item.
I'm sorry.
No, ma'am. No.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Mr. Wolf, do you have anything else that you need to say? Do we need to close the public hearing before he responds? Okay. The public hearing then is now closed if there is no one else signed up to speak. And Mr. Wolf, you may go ahead.
Sure. So one thing that was touched on is it's a really nice neighborhood. It's a great area, and that's one thing that attracted me to it. And this will also be a great project with good people that will be living there as well, and can call this home and walk to their church and be a part of the community and the neighborhood, just like y'all are involved. So so that's what I just leave it on is I think it'll be good people who will also live there, just like the residents who are there right now. And then one other thing is that the single family there, if it is next to the retail center, just the transition of it is, I think, also is what helps the project as well, where we can transition to a higher use, medium use, than down to the lower. So that's all I'd like to say. Thank y'all for y'all's time.
Thank you. Do any of the commissioners have any other questions for staff? Or, okay, then we can entertain a motion regarding this item.
I move that we approve as presented.
Motion by Commissioner Warren.
Second that.
We have a second. And Ms. McNichol, will you call the roll, please?
No.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, looks like next item is item BB. Ooh, Sophia's presenting this one.
Yes, good evening. This is a rezoning request that may look familiar. It's the Berry Creek Crossing PUD. This particular property is located at 2800 North IH 35. It is currently zoned ag and residential, and the applicant is requesting a PUD, Planned Unit Development District, with a base zoning of general commercial and high-density multifamily MF2. You can see the property located here on the screen and identified in red hats just at the intersection of 130 and 35. That's about the northeast corner of that intersection. And some surrounding uses include a mobile home dealership to the north, custom home builder, and then office warehouse and contractor services being developed to the south. This particular request may look familiar to you, as this was a request that came through straight zoning to the commission. The commission made a recommendation to the city council to approve the request. However, when it reached the city council denied the request. Subsequently, the applicant, who is on the meeting today, requested to resubmit within the 12-month time period of the request, and the city council permitted the application permitted the reapplication, I should say, within that time period. So last time you reviewed the request, it was a straight zoning of C3 and MF2. The applicant has worked to try to address those concerns through the use of a planned unit development district. The future land use, as you may recall, for this area is an employment center. And to the north is the regional center with a bit of open space included there for the area that's identified within the floodplain. The employment center designation has a ratio of 80% non-residential, 20% residential. It is really intended to be something that supports advanced manufacturing, warehouse, some flex space, high density residential, and mixed use supporting services for the employment center. As indicated, the ratio that is recommended for employment center is 80-20. The existing conditions show about 4% non-residential, 2% residential, and an extensive amount of percentage that is currently unentitled or retains the agriculture exemption. The regional center, which is that portion to the north, is really targeted about 75% non-residential, 25% residential. That mix is slightly different of what it's envisioned in that area. That is envisioned to be more of a retail area, mixed use with some density as well. The open space, as indicated previously, is really that area that's the floodplain. The zoning right now is mostly agriculture with just a small percentage of single-family residential identified there in yellow. The applicant is requesting a PUD and is requesting for the Zone A, which would be the portion of the property along 130 here, along the frontage, to be the C3 designated area, and the MF2 to be the area that's designated for that high-density multifamily. That follows in line with the previous zoning that you did review on screen. High density multifamily in the back. Okay. So the PUD itself really hits on three components. The first is density. Through the PUD, it would limit this development. So the Zone B here in the back would be limited to 650 units. Given what we have seen in apartment developments, that essentially is 2 apartment complexes based on our experience reviewing the density for larger developments. This PUD also limits the uses that are allowed within both categories. So in the next couple of slides I'll run through, they'll show specifically some uses that have been removed from consideration in order to really allow for this area to be developed to its best use. And then the final piece that it covers is the phasing of uses. This is specifically intended to cover some discussions that have been taking place at the council level, which is trying to identify when are commercial uses going to be provided for the corresponding residential that's requested. And so through this PUD, the applicant has proposed that a minimum of 1 commercial lot shall be platted, ready, and available with access from the public right-of-way via driveway or shared drive, with utilities delivered to the pad site, including but not limited to water, sewer, drainage, and electric available to that pad. Additionally, at least 6,000 square feet of commercial shell building space shall be ready and available for lease purchase for commercial business to finish out at the time of the certificate of occupancy of the first multifamily project. The Zone A is intended to be general commercial, and the building dimensions are identified here on the screen, generally about 60 feet height maximum with the corresponding setbacks. And this commercial is really intended to serve a larger area. Given the location of this commercial, the intersection of two major highways, this will serve not just residents that are surrounding this property, but many people going north along this feeder road. The uses boxed in red represent uses that have been prohibited through this PUD. That includes everything from a blood plasma center, funeral home, parking lot, heliport, pest control, multifamily attached self-storage, firing range. Essentially, we looked at those uses that would not be supportive of not only the attached residential, but wouldn't be supportive of our gateway into Georgetown. Additionally, the applicant has placed restrictions on fuel sales and automotive part sales. There shall be no more than one fuel station along this within this property, and it should be limited to 20 fuel dispensers, no more than one car wash, and both uses shall be located on the property fronting the property, and a car wash shall be permitted only as an accessory use, not as a primary use to the site. Additionally, should an automotive part sales indoor retail establishment want to be established here, it must be at least 500 feet away from the fuel sales station. The intention here is that this intersection does not become an auto-related only use, but that it has supporting uses to complement the area and the proposed residential. From a high-density multifamily designation, I shared with you the limit on the number of units, but also these are general uses that are intended for the high-density multifamily designation, attached multifamily units that could go up to 24 units an acre. This development, given the number of units that are proposed and the acreage, is generally developing at that 18 to 20 units per acre threshold, so under what is allowed in the 24 units per acre zoning designation. And here, the applicant has removed schools, he has removed student housing, halfway house, group homes from the intended use, so it is an area that promotes the density that's encouraged as part of the comprehensive plan. Additionally, here the applicant has requested some flexibility in the MF2 area to move that commercial line to allow for some smaller neighborhood serving uses such as dry cleaning, daycare, pharmacy, banking, financial services, fitness center. The intent here is to have some neighborhood supporting uses should the entire multifamily area not be developed as such. Staff has reviewed this application for consistency with the rezoning criteria as well as the PUD. We did find the application was complete. It is consistent with the comprehensive plan. We did find that it promotes the health, safety, and general welfare of the area. As you have seen in previous rezoning requests around this area, there's a large amount of light industrial, business park, and employment center uses both along the airport road, I-35 area, as well as just south of the 130 and 35 interchange. And as a result, corresponding residential units are needed within this area to support those employment type uses. Additionally, the proposed rezone would bring the ratio up to about 9% in non-residential and about 19% in the residential split. We did find that the zoning change is compatible with the present zoning and conforming uses. To the northeast is the Berry Springs Park. So the multifamily will be overlooking that Berry Springs area, and the more intense uses are located along the feeder road. We did find that this property is suitable for the uses that are being proposed. It does provide a variety of housing types in this area. We found that the orderly creative arrangement of the land uses does comply with the criteria there. As far as a planned and integrated comprehensive transportation system, transportation sidewalks weren't necessarily part of this particular PUD. They will meet our minimum UDC requirements for sidewalks, frontage, and connectivity. And so that is why we put a partial compliance. Additionally, cultural and recreational facilities for this area were not detailed in the PUD. The applicant did state that they'll meet the minimum requirements of the UDC for parkland dedication and improvement requirements. And additionally, the staging of the development in a manner which can be accommodated by timely facilities, public utilities, facilities, and services. Utilities will be provided at the time of development. And additionally, given the phasing of that commercial that has been added into the PUD, we did find that this application is consistent with that criteria. We did notice for this rezoning, and we've received 0 comments in favor and 0 comments in opposition to the request. And so in summary, this is a PUD request to allow for general commercial along the frontage and multifamily along the rear. 3 major areas have been covered in this PUD: the density, the uses, and the timing of commercial services as part of this application. Chair, that completes my presentation. The applicant is on the meeting, and I do not believe he has a formal presentation, but he is available and has been patient for the rest through the rest of the meeting.
Thanks, Sophia. Anybody have questions for staff on this item? So, Sophia, does the planning department staff feel that, is there anything outlined in the PUD in the way of this addressing the employment center? Because, so I guess where I'm coming from is we've seen a lot of these lately, and it seems employment center is the #1 future land use area that gets presented for rezoning to residential. And there's only so much of that, and there's only so much that we can do away with before you don't have a lot of that. And I understand the argument a lot of times on, you know, that may not be highest and best use, and that may not be the most economically feasible for the property seller. I get all that, but I just wanted to see if this identified any areas that would kind of tie them to that employment center.
Yeah, thank you for asking the question. This area is identified as employment center as shown on this map here. To the south here at the intersection of 130 and 35, you've reviewed a PUD in this area, and this area currently is identified as a regional center. However, through the entitlement process, it is really developing more as an employment center with business park and supporting uses than necessarily a regional center. We do believe that through the expansive nature of the employment center on this side of 130, coupled with how this area south of 130 is developing, this particular property will not take away from the intent of an employment center, and in some ways will complement it given the residential nature of that has not been provided in any of the areas to the southeast or even to the west of 35. The percentage of residential that's allowed, that's encouraged, has not been developed to the west of 35 or down in this area that is shaping more like an employment center than a regional center.
Okay, so on your ratio
Mhm.
outline, what is that? That one is that one's Titan on that's Titan Gateway on the east side of 35. Is that included in your ratio?
No, it's not. Mm-mm.
Okay, so that would move.
That would further increase.
It's pretty close proximity. It's a large area, so that would move the commercial piece of your ratio use.
Much higher.
Okay.
If the ratios really just include this segment of the employment center.
Right.
If we were to adjust our calculations to color what is now red down at the intersection, the south intersection of 130 and 35 to employment center, I think that would increase the amount of non-residential that's being provided and further reduce the residential that is being proposed here.
Anybody else have a question for staff?
I do have one question. Ms. Nelson, this PUD seems to, I'm thinking about when this property was brought to us earlier and to the council. This PUD is not, it adds some restrictions on uses, correct?
Yes.
It appears to reallocate, I don't know, 2 to 4 acres from the commercial to the, I'm sorry, or the other way around, I forget. Anyway, there's a very minor reallocation of acreage, it appears, but it's still a very non-specific PUD. Do we know exactly where the boundary would be between the residential? I mean, I know commercial's at the front, residential's at the back. Is that all we really know?
At this point, yes, this is a higher level PUD. We've seen these from time to time where there is not a specific product that's being proposed. Here, the applicant, and he can share a little bit more with you, is generally aiming at that 32 to 34 acre frame for multifamily and about 15 to 17 acres of the commercial.
Okay, yeah, I'm just kind of trying to get a feel for whether this proposal would be received much differently from the original proposal. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Does development support this proposal?
Does development, what do you mean by that?
Your department?
The planning department does not make a recommendation, but in looking at the criteria, we did find that this request does meet nearly all of the criteria that has been established by the UDC.
Thank you.
So Sophia, this is Cherie. Just to clarify, because I know that we had approved this previously, it went to City Council denied it. They're allowing the applicant obviously to resubmit a zoning change application within 12 months. It doesn't seem like much of the application has really changed. So why would we envision if we were to approve this again and this went before City Council, the City Council wouldn't deny this again? I don't see where much has changed other than we're resubmitting.
Sophia, this is Rajiv. I'm happy to answer any questions at the right time, so please let me know.
Okay.
Commissioner Heinzman, would you like me to address that or would you like the applicant to?
Either one. I'm just trying to figure out what has changed. So this will be a much more of a favorable outcome for the applicant with City Council.
I will share my thoughts and then ask the applicant to do the same. From my perspective, the concerns I have heard at the City Council level are twofold, both the amount of multifamily that is being developed within the city as a whole, but specifically ensuring that there are services tied to the multifamily units that are being developed and that we're simply not receiving a large amount of residential without services being provided. If that's the concern that the council has, we've seen this concern probably more so in our southeast quadrant of the city, specifically along the Westinghouse corridor. In those circumstances, we have found that the inclusion of the timing and phasing of commercial has helped applications be successful. And so the phasing language that the applicant has included in this PUD may be something that the City Council feels addresses the concerns. Ultimately, I do believe on this particular case, if my memory serves me right, there is also a concern with the max number of units that would be allowed on this property at full build out at 24 units an acre. And while the developer was not intending to build to the fullest unit amount at the time of rezoning, there was not, with the straight zoning process, as you know, we cannot limit that number to below. And so I think what the developer is trying to address is is twofold: the phasing and the timing of commercial, and also the number of units that would actually be allowed to be constructed on the site. I'll ask the applicant to either correct me or to add to that, but that's my understanding of what he's trying to accomplish with this PUD.
You're exactly right, Sophia. And Commissioner, if I may provide you a little bit more background to this. We originally, when we proposed the rezoning, straight rezoning, as Sophia said, there wasn't a mechanism of limiting the number of units. So at the uses that were proposed in terms of commercial in the front and multifamily in the back, or high density residential in the back, they were not a concern that I heard from council. Their concerns were the number of units, which added up to about 864 units in the original application, and the phasing of commercial at the same time as the multifamily development, and to have a PUD zoning, which where the city and the applicant can work together on making things better than what would be otherwise. So we addressed all of those concerns for the council members. I met with some of the council members who had expressed their concerns, understood what they wanted to do, and proposed back what we would do. So we reduced the number of units from 864 down to 650. We also committed that we would start commercial development at the same time as multifamily, such that the commercial pad and some commercial shell space would be available for lease or sale before we receive our first certificate of occupancy for multifamily. And so those issues were addressed, and they were written in the petition that was submitted to the city council in the March timeframe, suggesting why we were requesting that the rezoning be allowed to be submitted before the 12-month period was up from the denial date of January. And through those communications, city council members were satisfied, and we received full support for that petition. And we have outlined all of those items in our PUD zoning, in addition to additional uses that we have prohibited for the site, working with Sophia and her team. So our view is that any concerns that the city council had have been addressed in this rezoning request. And I'm happy to answer additional questions for you.
Yeah, I just have one more question. I know you're noting that the property, this development is going to back right up to Berry Creek and Berry Springs Park and Preserve. The buffer between the apartments and the preserve, what's the buffer? I'm assuming also based on Exhibit A that you are planning to save all the heritage trees?
Correct. So the reason that there is a range of 32 to 34 acres is because this site is very unique in the sense that if you look at most of the sites that Sophia mentioned across from 35 or across from 130, they are as flat as they come, and there are hardly any trees on them. This site is kind of bifurcated. In the front part is fairly flat. There are still some nice trees. This used to be an RV park in the past. And but then as you get further back, the site drops off, the topography drops off, and it matches all the way down to the creek. And there are some amazing trees in the back there. So our plan was that we would both based on topography and the trees, that we wanted to have some flexibility as to how much space we would need to fit those units in that area. And hence the reason that we would go back. And in addition to that, there is about 7 acres of floodplain in the back that buffer kind of around the creek area, which we plan to preserve. And we do not plan to encroach into any of that area. So that's why, some of that flexibility is needed. and that buffer would be maintained.
Okay, thank you very much for your response.
Sure.
Okay, commissioners, any other questions for staff or the applicant on the item? Okay. Not hearing any. We don't have anybody signed up to speak on this item, do we? Okay, if not, we can open the public hearing and close the public hearing. And the floor is open to a motion.
I'll move that we approve as presented.
This is Doug, I'll second.
Okay. Motion by Commissioner Warren. Who was the second? Yeah, Commissioner Noble. Any discussion on this item? I do have one more question. So what was, I think the applicant mentioned it, but so when this came in before, based on 24 units an acre, correct, times 30, I mean, so you're up in the 800 zone?
Right.
And
Correct.
so by doing a PUD, which is something we've talked about before with some of these applicants that have come in and said, hey, we want X zoning. We only want to build 650 units. And we say, well, that's great, but we can't limit that. So this is a situation where they've come back and said, this is how,
This is the max density there.
basically, this is a way for us to create, what is it, stipulations on zoning, more or
Yes.
less.
That's right. The PUD gives you the ability to target specific development standards to a property.
Okay. Any other discussion on this item? Okay, we can call roll. Yes.
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 Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Yes.
So that passes 7-0. Recommendation of approval. So let's see, that takes us to item BC. Let's see. So in the future, I've thought about this earlier, and in the future, when we have items like this, is there a way to put them on the agenda in the, basically the opposite order? Or I can move them when we get here, but
Yes, we certainly can.
these are usually quick, and he ends up sitting here all night listening to all this when, just trying to be helpful.
Yes, sir. If you like, we can certainly front load these kinds of discussion items towards the front. We'll just reach out ahead of time to see what you like.
That works.
Well, tonight, the end goal of our presentation will be to ask the commission to hold a public hearing and make a recommendation on some proposed changes to our landscaping and tree preservation ordinances. This is a process that we actually started last August as part of our annual UDC amendment cycle. This year, our UDC amendments mainly focused on cleaning up conflicts and issues that we commonly encounter when considering landscaping and tree preservation on all types of development throughout the city. So throughout the fall and the early spring, the UDC Advisory Committee met each month and talked through each of the issues that the council approved on our list of things to amend, and ended up coming up with proposed terms, making a recommendation for most of the items, and they did choose to not consider some of the items. But this whole process started to wrap up back in March when we came to you for the first time to review the first set of issues and receive the commission's feedback. Excuse me, it may have been February, sometime around the winter storm. We then checked in with the city council back in February and March and got their feedback on the additional terms where they gave us 2 more topics to look at. So that delayed our process a little bit, coming to a final conclusion since we had two more things to include. And over the past few months, the UDC AC has considered those items, proposed their terms. And so tonight, and made a recommendation. So tonight, what we're going to do is briefly review the terms that we discussed with you guys earlier this winter. Just to give you a recap, I'll discuss in a bit more detail the two new terms that the council asked the UDC AC to consider. And then ultimately, I'll ask y'all to consider making a recommendation to the council on whether or not our UDC should be amended this way. Mr. Chairman, if you like, I'm open to questions as we go tonight, or we can hold them all to the end. Steve is here if you have any technical questions, but hopefully we cover it all. The first set of issues we covered this spring were related to tree preservation. Most of these issues were related to defining unclear terms in our UDC or addressing common situations that come up a lot in review that the UDC just did not anticipate. These could be conflicts with trees and utility easements, questions about how you treat ornamental trees, questions about when a developer needs to survey trees and which trees they need to survey. Throughout this discussion, you ended up with a lot of new terms and ideas on how and when developers need to survey trees and which, the idea being to streamline the tree survey process and save money, but also get staff and developers the information they need to make informed decisions about their property. We also revised a little bit the process for removing trees for work related to utilities or construction in the right-of-way, streamline that process. Introduced a better understanding when a tree inventory is needed. Oftentimes we're considering planned unit development requests or development agreement requests where we're proposing to modify our standard tree preservation rules. And in those cases, it's helpful for us to have more information about the kinds of trees we have and the quality of trees we have. We can make better informed decisions and write better standards in that case. We also did some clarifying on which trees on a site count when you're considering when you're calculating your tree mitigation fees and mitigation due. We also established the priority in which our different mitigation options should be considered. We also slightly adjusted our tree preservation fees. We discovered a real discrepancy in the fact that a 12-inch tree was charged the same amount of money to be removed as a 24-inch tree, although 24-inch tree is more like a 26-inch tree, which would get charged the higher heritage tree fee. So we created a middle pricing range, slightly reduced the lower end and slightly increased the higher end, just to place more emphasis on the larger trees like we should. We also expanded our ability to vary different development standards to encourage developers to save trees. If you can save a 26-inch tree or a stand of multiple 12 to 14-inch trees, but you have to lose a parking space, we can work with you there. Something else we also did is just allow developers by default to remove more trees than otherwise allowed by the UDC if they simply mitigate for them at a higher ratio. Previously, that was there are some types of development where you just have to remove more trees, and that required a special request and a lot of paperwork for all parties involved. And so here we just set the expectation about what would be required if you wanted to pursue that option. The next set of items we discussed last fall were about street yard and gateway landscaping and parking as well. Most of these were cleanup items, describing how uses ought to be, different uses ought to be treated in terms of landscaping, like auto sales. Is it display? Is it storage? Do you screen it? Do you not screen it? Probably the biggest thing here is just adjusting our planting ratios. They were a bit outdated and not quite what designers were wanting to install to get our best products. We updated that to make that easier on all parties. Yes. Based on the size of your street yard, which is the area between the building and the street, you required a certain amount of plantings, shrubs, ornamental trees, and trees. The range at which the square footage range at which you broke into a different category to require a different number of plantings was huge. It was like 1 foot to 500,000 square feet is one range. One to 10,000, 10 to 50,000. I apologize. Yeah, it's just not when you look at the data, that's just not what you generally see. So we updated that as well as address conflicts and provide a guidance on what to do when tree plantings and landscaping interfere with utility easements. Our code prescribes that your landscaping, which includes shade trees, goes in the same place as utility easements. And those two do not always mesh well. And so it writes in standards for Steve to consider with designers at the time of construction to just find an alternative for that and design around that instead of having to go through this alternative process all the time. Yes, sir.
Ethan, why don't you use mitigation more than trying to charge people for trees? It's better off to get more trees for a 24-inch tree rather than money for them.
Yes, sir. One of the items that's being changed under the tree preservation section is the order in which mitigation will be considered. So first and foremost, we will consider on-site replacement plantings. Then we will consider aeration, fertilization. How do we make sure the trees that we're leaving stay in good health? And then we consider fees and off-site plantings. So we look for every possible opportunity to replace trees on site or to just save them in the first place. And then we consider those other options like paying the fee.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. The last set of criteria, excuse me, not criteria, the last set of issues we considered this spring were regarding screening water conservation. So right now our UDC is written so that it only discusses dumpsters and waste containers. So we just expanded that language to also cover recycling containers and other things you usually see nowadays. Then we proposed some alternative standards for commercial landscaping to help reduce, to encourage more water conscious and water savvy landscaping rather than just a giant lawn that has to be watered all the time. How can we encourage different types of landscaping, xeriscaping, especially using native plantings and different styles of landscaping. Oh, yes. Right now, our UDC does not allow artificial turf anywhere in the city. But that was actually a request from the public. And so the proposed terms would allow it anywhere where it's not visible from the street. And it also gives some discretion to staff about what types of turf you allow. We can allow and prescribe some technical details on what we should or should not consider. Yes, sir. Yeah, yeah, very touchy subject. So we did discuss those amendments with y'all back in February, which I know some of y'all were not on the commission yet for that. But that information is in your packet, and we can discuss anything you have questions about today. And the UDC Advisory Committee made their recommendation on that back in March. Since then, we have found some typos and that kind of a thing, so you will see that that's different. But other than that, the body of material is the same. Back in March, working around the winter storm, the City Council asked us to heard the same material that the P&Z did back in February, and asked us to consider 2 additional items related to tree preservation um, at the request of a few members of the development community. The first one, which we're calling 11.1, is related to the size of credit trees, which we'll discuss about here in a moment. And the second one is related to receiving credit for trees planted on new single-family lots related to tree preservation. So the first item related to credit trees is really about the size of what can and should be considered a credit tree. On a commercial development, or which can include anything non-residential or multifamily, you are required to mitigate for both heritage trees, those are those trees 26 inches and up, or protected trees, excuse me, which are those trees 12 inches and up. You can receive credit for trees between 6 to 12 inches that you leave on site as credit towards your mitigation. Currently, our minimum size is 6 inches. And there was some desire from the development community to reduce that down to some number that may be appropriate. So the idea behind setting a minimum is that if you reserve a 6-inch, with a 6-inch tree, you kind of know what you're getting, right? That's still a pretty decent sized tree. It's also an established tree with a larger established critical root zone. So as you develop around it and disturb soil and compact it, knock a hole in it with an excavator, it is more likely to persevere and stay alive and provide you with a good quality tree on your finished product. So in considering whether or not we should reduce that size, the UDC-AC recommended that we do allow developers to receive credit for smaller trees, but only in certain situations. So they proposed 5 criteria in which you could use a tree that was between 3 and 6 inches for credit towards the protected trees that you removed. So the first criteria is that it has to meet some location requirements on the site. The tree should not be in an area called out for future development, because what would be the point of counting this tree's credit if in 2 years on your phase 2, you're going to come take it out anyways. And it should not be in areas where we typically expect trees to be removed. Site triangles around intersections, utility easements, especially those with wet utilities in them, and not around another existing protected or heritage tree, a larger tree that we have more interest in protecting. Second criteria is about the health of the tree. That is where that tree inventory would come into play. An arborist can make a determination about a tree's health when they do a survey, provide photographs, and they can generally describe whether the tree is a good specimen of its species or not.
What about getting close to a foundation of a new 5 feet from a proposed building or anything like that?
That would be the wording you'll see in the red lines does give the urban forester, that would be Steve, some discretion there. But mainly there, I think we'd be concerned about the critical root zone of the tree. You agree?
More important, the bigger the tree.
Absolutely.
So there's a plus for smaller trees.
Absolutely. They can grow around it better.
Yeah, in a situation like that, a lot of it's going to also depend on the like mature size that the tree will eventually become. So, you know, if they're trying to keep a smaller tree right next to a foundation, that tree's supposed to, you know, get 26 plus inches in size. It's obviously not going to be a great spot to retain that tree over length of time. So in that case, that would not count towards.
Also, the function of whether you're on the east.
The other consideration is whether or not the tree stands alone. You know, 1 3-inch tree by itself doesn't do a lot for you, but if you get 4 or 5 of those together as a group, that presents a natural feature worth protecting. So that's another consideration there. Point number C gets to Mr. Haney's question about the critical root zone. If you're going to be saving a tree, there's an area equal to an area with a radius equal to 1/2 of the tree's diameter in feet. So if you have a 10-inch tree, your critical root zone will be 5 feet around the tree. Thank goodness I got that right. That is that outer ring, that outer 5 feet, is where trees can generally take some disturbance around their root zone and recover. That inner 5 feet is what's critical to the health of the tree. So of course we don't want to disturb that. Point number D sets the ratio at which you can receive credit. So for every 1/2 inch of tree you save, you can receive for every inch of tree you save, you receive 1/2 that inches of credit. So if you have 20 inches of credit trees removed, and you save 20 inches of credit trees, you can receive 10 inches towards your mitigation, and you only have 10 inches left to satisfy. The idea behind the 0.5 to 1 ratio comes from you kind of have a 50-50 shot of it living or dying. Then lastly, it must be a species of shade tree. So we don't want to be saving ornamental trees like crepe myrtles, mountain laurels.
And that's all determined based on our existing preferred plant list. So it has to be in that category of shade tree.
These are the red lines in your packet to be reviewed. This is the actual change that would be made to the UDC. Save for some formality in the language, it is basically what we just walked through. Are there any questions on this particular item? Any questions, concerns? Yes, sir, we will.
Do you need additional time or?
I would like to make a motion to postpone it till next meeting.
Will require us to just adjust our schedule with the city council. But if you feel like you need more time, we're happy to accommodate for that.
I don't know what the rest of you guys want to do, but
I mean, we can vote on that. I mean, I'm fine with that based on,
Yeah.
I mean, I've been up here discussing this, but the majority, I mean, there's a bunch of us that haven't been, and this has been going on for a while.
You guys used to see it. I will admit that I'm still learning a little bit with the fire hose. But if we pushed it just well, and I'm not saying we stop this presentation. I think we move on and work through it. But we want some time to digest. Is that what we're thinking?
that's my point.
Would it mess you up too bad if we went
We
to
will
the next meeting?
We'll just need to reschedule with the city council. We have to renotice in the newspaper, and that's completely possible. We want to make sure that you are comfortable and that you've had the time to digest this information. Steve and Ethan have put an extensive amount of work into this. And so I want to publicly say thank you to their work. But if you need some more time, we're happy to give you that time.
And trust is not an issue. It's just
Haven't heard it.
figuring out what the hell we're looking at. You know what I mean?
Would you like more information on the kind of first round that we discussed back in February, or just more information on?
Well, I don't want
the
these
ordinance in
guys to have to
general?
go through the first round again. So, you know, what I might do is read it front to back and then mark it up. And if I have any questions, I'll call you. Is that all right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
We can also just do, a quick and fast.
No, I don't even want to put them through quick and fast of the first round. They've already been through it all.
Well, we can just do tree preservation basics.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. That would be helpful for me.
Okay.
But they all know it. So I can do that on my own or with you.
Yeah,
on
we
the
can do it one-on-one if you like.
Great. Thanks.
Talking about this for 22.
Getting better. This is easier to understand than when we looked at it the first time. I'll be on, it's,
But for 22 years, we've been talking about.
it's gotten
We
easier.
talked about it Before I got here.
Because I'll tell you, we have less, we're getting to a place where we'll have less heated discussions because
Mhm.
we had a couple of meetings where we got on like 30, 45 minutes about trees. And that happened several times. And I think from what I've read in here, at least, it gives us a little bit more, it's like, it's more cut and dry on, here's what you have to do if you do this, and there's a lot less.
Yeah.
Ambiguity.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really helps you our intent behind most of the amendments is to really help you navigate the gray area. Gray area.
I'm amazed by the amount of work that's gone into this.
A lot.
Yes.
That one.
You guys are doing a great job.
Yeah,
You guys,
that was a lot of work.
I won't even ask how you got to trying to measure crepe myrtles with half a dozen trunks, but that's a pretty elaborate.
Part of the issue.
formula. Anyway, I have a great appreciation because I know this has been discussed over and over and over, and a great deal of input's been sought, and I really appreciate it.
Really? Okay. So with this item, the UDC AC did not have any comments besides correcting a typo. Just so you're aware. So, well, we can move on to the next item if y'all like.
Yeah, keep going.
Good. The second thing the council asked us to look at back in March was a bit trickier. So currently, single-family development is only responsible for preserving and mitigating heritage trees. So those are specific species of trees, mainly varieties of oak, walnut, ash, pecan, black walnut. Your native hardwoods, essentially. Only required 26 inches and up, so the big boys. Any of your smaller trees, even smaller multi-trunk trees, developers are not required to save or to provide mitigation for. So that is kind of one landscaping and tree preservation requirement they have to follow. Developers also have a second requirement that comes into play with trees. That's a landscaping requirement. So tree ordinance requirement, landscaping ordinance requirement. Landscaping requirement for single-family homes is to plant at least one minimum 3-inch caliper tree in the front yard per 50 feet of frontage. So if you have a 50-foot lot in the middle of the block, they're required to plant one tree. If you have a 50-foot by 120-foot lot which would be our smallest size lot, on a corner, they're required to plant one for the 50 feet of frontage they have in the front yard, and then 3 down the side, one for each set of 50 feet of frontage. The issue comes, and the conflict comes with this issue, where the developer does not receive any credit for the trees that they plant on single-family lots. Oftentimes, developers will plant on common areas, whether that's a amenity center, an HOA lot, open space lot. If they plant street trees in the right-of-way, someplace where it's managed by an entity that can maintain the tree, and where we get to review it by site plan. In these areas, since they are not a single-family home, we can also require permits for removals. Excuse me. State law prevents us from requiring removal for any tree that is less than 26 inches in diameter, which would be our heritage tree size. State law requires that we can't require a permit for trees greater than 10 inches in diameter. But our local rules would say that we can't require on a single family home, but our local rules would expand that to 26 inches and up. We cannot require a homeowner to receive a permit to remove a tree. Traditionally, developers do not receive credit for trees planted on single family lots because they're planted to meet the landscaping requirements, not any mitigation requirements, and then for the issues described. We do not monitor maintenance of the trees. We do not review them when they're installed. On your building permit plot plan, you'll just see a dot labeled tree and it goes there. Oftentimes through front yards, you have water, sewer, and electric, and even potentially gas running through a yard. And so it's very common to see conflicts with utilities here. It's also very common for developers to plant more than one tree in a front yard. And if you're on a 45-foot lot, the 20-foot setback, it's not a very large yard. And 2 live oaks will not grow to their full potential there and will start to dwarf each other out. So in doing that, in considering this, we did a lot of research to see what other cities do, which is where maybe I'll ask Steve to take over and explain what other cities do.
So we reached out to Austin, Cedar Park, Leander, San Marcos, Pflugerville, and Kyle to see if they provide the option of credit for residential street yard plantings. A number of cities did. It was kind of actually a 50-50, as you can see. We also inquired about how they enforce these. So if for the cities that were actually providing credit, like how is it that they, I guess, monitored or tried to keep up on whether those trees were being maintained correctly. There wasn't really a big follow-up process. It was just more of a, at the end of closeout, the city arborist or landscape planner would go out and verify that the trees were there. And then that was really all. Aside from that, they relied on the community's maintenance agreement, their CC&Rs, things like that, that they had within their own subdivision. And then as far as whether or not they counted all the trees that were planted, or if they only counted trees above and beyond the basic requirement for a residential lot. There was only one city that allowed it, even with just the standard. Like Ethan was saying, how we require at least one for every 50 linear feet. There was only Austin allowed for that. And then again, the inspection process was determined that really it was at time of CO and the final closeout. They would potentially hold up the last house and make sure that this requirement was installed. Next, we looked at a couple sites around town that have come in the past, I believe, year. We looked at a 32-acre, 96-lot subdivision based on the information we had as far as the inches that were required on that site and the mitigation amount and forms that were provided for that project versus the overall cost for if the developer were to come in and plant one tree or however many trees would be needed to meet that requirement of mitigation inches. You can see here, there were 32 trees removed. The initial or the form of mitigation was fee in lieu. There was no ability to plant on site. And what that means is there was no ponds, common amenity centers, or areas within the subdivision that they could just go in and plant trees to begin with. And then there was no on-site planting, mainly because we don't currently allow for that. So that wasn't an option. And then the amount of inches that would be required is 36 or 96 total inches. That ultimately breaks out to 32 trees. So you're kind of just for reference. And then the total cost associated with replacing those actually in a residential subdivision would be $33,600. So you can see there's a pretty big difference between what we charge for fee in lieu versus what it would actually cost to replace all those inches on a site. We went through and did this on a couple of projects. We we tried to get a range from a small 15 acre up to a larger subdivision that had over a couple hundred homes. In this particular situation, you can see that there was 26 inches removed. That's roughly one tree. And then for on-site plantings, you'd be looking at right around the 26 trees. This site used a combination of fee and lieu. We offer aeration and soil fertilization. And then we also offer on-site replacement. This site used all three of them. Had they not and only gone with the option to plant back on site, it would have run in the 27,000 range. On a larger site, we had a 20 acre, 96 lot subdivision, more heavily wooded. So there was more inch removed on this overall site. And you can see that the amounts for what was paid and the options that they had, they exhausted all the options that we give them. And then still had a fee in lieu amount of almost 400 or 40,000 to replace on site. That would have run upwards of 300,000. Here on another lot or another subdivision, it was 77 acres with 250. This was a fortunate situation to where they were able to designate an entire lot as a preserved amenity area, and all the trees were luckily on that one lot. So they actually didn't have any removals whatsoever. This was very convenient. And then we had another 59 acre lot or subdivision with 151 lots. Again, this was a very wooded site. As you can see, there were 425 inches removed, and the total fee in lieu was 85,000. To replace on site, it was upwards of 400,000 if they had tried to replant in all their residential street yards, as well as anywhere else on site. So this table here breaks down under our new rules, kind of what we can expect to see. We can see here that this takes into consideration the possibility of planting one tree per all the requirements that we will cover on a site, or up to 2 trees. This doesn't go any higher just because you kind of get the point. But even at 1 tree at 50% of the ratio, they're able to offset 48 inches worth of trees. So in this case, they would completely offset their mitigation for that first subdivision. On the other subdivisions, some of them were able to completely replace it. Some of them were making at least a dent in what they owed, so it was dropping their overall mitigation fee at the end of it. But again, that just varies depending on what the sites look like and how many lots are coming in, how much space they have in residential front yards, and then ultimately what it is they're willing to plant on site. So the proposed terms are to allow new trees planted on residential lots to be used for mitigation when the following conditions are met. A would represent the minimum 3-inch caliper that we currently have in our code, so that would have to be met. We opted to exclude B, C, and D. We felt that this didn't necessarily offer the best options to the developer, so we got rid of a maximum inch per lot. We got rid of the 30% total mitigation throughout a whole site, and then we are making it to where it's on top of the existing requirements. So they have to first meet the existing requirements of the residential landscapes, which is the 1 every 50 linear feet, and then anything above and beyond that, they will get credit for. They also need to first exhaust the common areas. So those would be the ponds, the parks, the amenity centers, things like that. Other than that, they have the ability to get 50% per inch planted. And the spacing that we're requiring on this is it has to be a minimum of 15 feet apart. With some of these lots, due to all the utilities in them and just, driveways, things like that, you end up with a smaller plantable area. And we didn't want to limit it so much that in reality, you could really only get one. So we decided after some debate that 15 feet on center would be the most acceptable option. And then this outlines the new verbiage that'll be going into our UDC. So do you have any questions?
This one is a bit trickier. The question- Good. My grip comes and goes.
Do you all want to take action in terms of making a recommendation or postponing?
It depends. I mean, floor is open to a motion, so it can be any way you guys want to go with it. If you want to make a motion to postpone, that's fine.
Yes, I want to push it. I'll make a motion that we postpone this till next meeting.
A second.
Okay, you want to call a roll? Yes. She left.
No, I'm not, did you ask, this is Sheree. I vote yes.
Excuse me, if I can ask if we can just continue this item to the next meeting, that will help us not have to renotice for the public hearing. Thank you.
That's fine.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Yes.
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 Okay. So the motion for continuing the item passes. Okay. So that was our, yeah.
But we can vote it next meeting if we choose. Right? Correct.
You've
And
done the public hearing part already.
I believe you could put it on you can go on consent, correct?
No.
No, it has to be on legislative again?
Yes. Not hold the public hearing tonight. Okay, so the item will be continued. The public hearing will be at the next meeting.
So Ethan, if I come up with some questions, I'll get ahold of you between now and then.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ethan answers his phone almost all the time.
Not all the time. But absolutely, if you have questions, feel free to shoot them to either Steve or I over email. Or if it'd be easier to just sit down for an hour and a half, and overview the process. We can pull up example plans. If you're a more visual person.
Galaxy Bakery. I'm in.
We can help you however you need it. Absolutely.
Tuesday?
Yeah, that'd work. Just let me know time for you.
Okay, we have any discussion items tonight?
Just a couple, thank you for sticking this meeting through with the extensive amount of items, but also our first hybrid type meeting. And I took a lot of notes in terms of where we can improve and adjust for the quality of your quality as well as the quality of people at home, and we'll work to improve that. Wanted to let you know that we have filled the assistant director position, and that person will not be starting until August, but we are nearing getting back to being fully staffed, and we're excited about that. So thank you all very much. That's it.
Okay, so we can, unless we have any questions from anyone else, alternative members, we can have a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
I'll second that. Let's call a roll. Hey, we got to vote. Hold on.
Let's go afternoon.
call the roll.
Let's finish this motion and then I'll get with you after. Mhm.
Yes.
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 Ma'am, yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Yes.
It is 9:09 and we're adjourned.